Hey everyone, welcome to the CyberHub Engage podcast. I am your host, James Azar. Make sure you're following us on your favorite social media platform, whether it be LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. You can find us at CyberHub Engage. We're even on Instagram, right, Micah? Awesome.
1,300 followers.
1,300 followers and counting. Please help us get over 1,500. We have a very, very special episode. This is take 2 of this episode because on the first one, we kind of had a technical difficulty. And the first one is so good, so this one is only going to be better. Got Johnathan Hunt, the Chief Information Security Officer for InVision App, in the studio back again.
Back again, number 2. Good morning, everyone.
It is morning, isn't it?
Yes, I think.
Yes.
Early afternoon.
It's early morning.
Depends
it's 5
on-
o'clock somewhere.
Yeah. 5 o'clock somewhere.
It's 5 o'clock. Some Irish guy sitting at a bar now going, this Guinness is delicious. Before we get started on today's episode, though, we want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. All right, guys. So before we kind of get going on today's episode, I want to talk to you about privacy and security, obviously, right? But how many of you guys do what I do? Travel a lot, go work out of coffee shops. You need to get out of it. You need to kind of go brainstorm. You know, you go to your favorite Starbucks, or in my case, my favorite coffee shop here in Atlanta. You sit down, you put in your AirPods, you're listening to your favorite CyberHub Engage or Goodbye Privacy podcast or Journey, if you want to listen to music, and you're having a good time. You're up and away working, going over apps, documents, coding, whatever it is that you do for work, analyzing logs, whatever it is. Reading a really important email from your boss, and then all of a sudden you see that person kind of staring at your screen, and you go, dude, don't look at my screen. Can't I have some privacy? Well, up until right now, the answer to that would have been, I got to sit in the corner of the coffee shop or the side of the coffee shop to get that. Not anymore. With Get Smart Eye, you don't have to do that anymore. Get Smart Eye is a very cool app that you can use on your phone. It reads your biometrics, so it reads your face. This is how it works. It's looking at your face. So while you're reading a document, it's making sure you're the only person looking at it. Try to put another phone in front of it, take a picture of the document, screen goes black. Someone gets behind you, tries to look at your screen, like that nosy person at Starbucks or wherever, screen goes black. No one can see what you're seeing on your device when you're using Get Smart Eye. So support our friends, and my very good friend Dexter, who is not a security guy, who came up with this product on a trip overseas dealing with security guys and went, how come I can see everything you guys see? Isn't that like the complete opposite of security? And he's absolutely right. He's launched this amazing product. So go to getsmarteye.com/James, getsmarteye.com/James, getsmarteye.com/James for a link to download the app and the opportunity to see a free demo of it. This is great for a person, a small business, an enterprise business. If you travel a lot, this is the right app for you. So again, go to getsmarteye.com/James to get access to the app I don't leave home without.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn with Cyber 2.0.
Hi, I'm Jerome from Valon Technologies.
We are hosting a lunch and learn for healthcare service providers and professionals. Our partner, Data Media Associates, is located in Alpharetta, Georgia, and the event is October 16th at 10 a.m.
Now come prepared to hear about cybersecurity insurance, risk mitigations with what's happening with ransomware, and also to learn more about HIPAA compliance.
And don't forget, we'll also have someone there to talk about cybersecurity insurance. Don't forget to register for the Lunch and Learn. You can go to our website, which is www.velontechnologies.com, which is spelled V as in Victor, ELON as in Nancy, technologies, which is plural.com. Look for that Lunch and Learn and click on it to register. See you soon.
Johnathan, welcome back to the studio.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
It's good to have you back. Thanks for coming back after, Micah's debacle the first time. I'd blame it on all kinds of stuff, but I'll just blame it on Micah today.
I mean, it's the easiest, right?
Right.
Just
blame it on Micah. I'm gonna make T-shirts. Blame it on Micah.
I blame things on Micah. He doesn't even work for me, and I blame stuff on him. So like when anything goes wrong, it's Micah's fault. We have a hashtag.
So I tell my wife that all the time. She goes, "Why isn't this done?" I'm like, "It's Micah's fault.
Micah's fault.
Micah's fault." You know, I mean, it's easy to blame Micah for everything, but so we had a really good episode the first time around, and unfortunately, only 25 minutes of that episode survived.
That's going to be a B-side somewhere, right? That's going to be like,
the first time around, first cut.
A couple years from now, like we're going to like sell it, like
when we're big,
a lost tape, maybe like a lost tape, right? Like we could be
like the Dave Chappelle lost tapes.
once we're big and famous and have like 5 billion followers.
I'll be happy with like 500,000.
Yeah. Okay.
I think 500,000 is a really good number.
It's a good number.
A niche.
Especially for a niche podcast.
Yeah, we need to get there, everybody.
Yeah.
Let's
tune in, subscribe.
Let's make that happen.
Yeah, subscribe.
Like start spinning up multiple devices.
We're at 50,000 right now.
Yes, we are.
So if everybody spun up 10 devices right now,
500,000.
You'd have 500,000.
Would be like Joe Rogan level.
I mean,
it's very interesting though, because in podcasting the statistics are unbelievable. So they say 90% of podcasts have up to 150 listeners.
Up to 150. Okay.
So to have 150 downloads. 90% of podcasts that you see have 90% of downloads. The one that you see trending, the big ones, the NPR, the Times, I don't know why they have anything at this point. Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has the number 1 podcast in the country. He has I think it's like 250,000 listeners to 500,000 listeners.
It's like a large variance, right? Is that what we're... So, yeah, so you got like 90% of the podcasts, 150, the other 10% capture the other several hundred thousands of
It's like,
listeners.
like 20% of your people do 80% of your work.
That's right.
So that I guess that applies on podcasts. I've been reading up on it, trying to figure out the statistics, the engagements, and so forth.
How do you move from...
How do you move from, let's say...
to that 10%.
Right, how do you move from 10,000 to...
100,000.
100,000.
Right? Yeah.
Standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
Right, standing on the... Right, you got to do a big push.
Yeah.
And that's really unbelievable.
And that's why you invited me here.
I did. I needed to get that big push
for take 2, so we can start creating B sides and lost tapes and have a limited edition showing and
Well, I want to transition to do some live stuff, go to some companies and just close down an evening, invite a bunch of people to come in and kind of do a live Q&A with a few CISOs. And so forth. So that should help. I mean, once you start going live, we're going to Augusta next week. We're doing a whole day of filming in Augusta.
That'll be awesome. You could do you could do a fan Q&A maybe. That would be cool. Have a sponsored fan party, bring in the fans, have a little Q&A. I don't know. I'm thinking Impractical Jokers. Didn't they do?
I love Impractical Jokers.
You know what I'm saying? Didn't they do Impractical Jokers live and they show up and they just talk and have some Q&A?
They were in Atlanta and I wanted to go so bad. I couldn't find anyone that wanted to go with me. So now I know you like to go to Impractical.
Are you serious?
I will text you. I will every time
call me, text me, email me.
I know they're going to be in Nashville in a few months. I'm I'm definitely making that 4-hour drive for Impractical Jokers.
It's totally worth it.
I'm so happy they're on Netflix now too.
Oh yeah.
So happy they're on Netflix.
Yeah. I mean, there's episodes I've missed. I can't wait to catch up on.
Yeah.
They're going to be great. Yeah.
Me too. I'm all right, Netflix, Impractical Jokers, go.
Because they're losing The Office, I heard, and they're gaining Impractical Jokers, right?
Well, The Office is still there.
But they're losing it.
Are they?
Yeah. It's been all over the news. They're losing it end of year or end of quarter or something like that. Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good move.
I don't know. Well,
I mean, I think it's...
But I think
I think it's licensing rights.
Yeah, but there's so much of The Office on YouTube.
Yeah.
That you don't really lose much. Plus, the best parts of The Office are the short skits of either Michael Scott, whenever I feel down, I just look for Michael's thoughts. Hey, Michael Scott, what you gonna do?
What you gonna do
when dreams come true?
You remember how hard it was for me to get you to watch that show?
Yeah, he tried for a year to get me to watch The Office. Yeah.
That is probably the best show ever made.
I don't know. I give so. Seinfeld is by far for me.
For you, best. Seinfeld. For me, it's Office first, Seinfeld second. But like, they're still top two.
I even love Friends.
Okay, you
kiss my ass.
I'm a little less of a Friends fan, but a little less. You know,
that is one show when it comes on, I'm like, no.
Yeah,
I can't even give you like a slight of a rating.
Yeah,
sorry.
I would say
respectfully.
I would say if I have to list my top 10, Friends would probably come in like, I don't know, 862nd or something. Like, you know what I'm saying? My top 10. I'm just letting you know. Like, I'm kidding.
Friends doesn't even make it on the list for me. Like,
it makes it on the 86th list.
It's number one on the shows not to watch on TV because it's a bunch of bullshit.
Well, it's number one on your list then. I mean,
on the list of things not to watch.
But it's number one on your list is what you're saying.
Right. On the things of not to watch. It's very important to look at those lists. It's like cybersecurity vendor lists, right? Like, I'm always looking at those. I'm like, who's number one on here? Okay. How much did you pay to be ranked number one?
That does
Most
happen.
of those rankings are pay to play.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No doubt.
I like to make an infograph comparing vendors to the shows.
I don't want to do that because it would take so much time. And you know what? That might be just as trending as your weekend spat. He had a weekend spat with someone who will remain unnamed on LinkedIn.
Are we going to go there? Are we going to talk about that on the
show?
He had
got me 50 friends over the weekend.
He got 50 connections and stuff like that. The person.
Hey, I heard you had a spat. Let's be friends.
The person he went on the spat with is a friend of mine, so I want to kind of keep it.
We got neutral.
I don't want to
middle ground.
Listen, first of all, my loyalty is always to Micah. It's never to anyone else. All right, Micah's been with me, employee number 2 in our company. Employee number 2 in our company.
Right on.
I'll never not back Micah up. If he's wrong, I'll tell him behind everyone's back he's wrong, but I'll never tell him in front of everyone else he is. And I'll just leave it at that. But Micah got into a spat with someone who's an influencer in cybersecurity on LinkedIn.
Wow.
Micah kind of uses LinkedIn for what LinkedIn is really purposely done for. It's a biz dev tool. That's what LinkedIn is.
Yeah.
It's a modern day sales tool. You don't have to go to a lame networking event.
Yeah.
You go to LinkedIn, you'll find more people. You can qualify the people.
Everybody you've ever wanted to find.
Everyone you've ever wanted to find. You connect with them and you solicit them for business. You want to talk to them business. And Micah did just that. He's been doing it for ages. That's how he reached out to you to get you on the show. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That's what Micah does. And he does it very, very well.
Does a good job at it.
And someone took offense to it, wanted to maybe almost dox him as a training opportunity for someone else. And we realized the challenges in our industry, especially between business development folks to CISOs, the almost sometimes lack of tact or just the subject line of an email or of a message. Don't be like Capital One. And you're like, no, like I'm never answering those. But that's not what he did. His message was fairly straight up, more of asking for help rather than trying
Interesting.
It was on LinkedIn and it got kind of.
Maybe you should reach out and ask him to be a guest.
I will when I'm in Colorado next because that's where this person's at. I'll actually go sit down with him and we'll do a fun little conversation. He is a vendor, so at the end of the day. I'm very selective of the vendors I bring on the show because I don't want to sell spit.
Yeah, you don't want. Yeah, exactly.
Our hashtag. I
don't think that's your MO.
It's not because there's so many podcasts that do vendor interviews. You don't need another one.
Another one, right?
Right. I mean, I really want to focus on people like you, right? People who are in the trenches, who are fighting every single day this fight that's called cybersecurity against multiple actors that you don't see. You don't know who your adversaries are. You're almost blinded in cybersecurity. You're almost blind. You're fighting a blind war.
I couldn't agree more. I think trenches is the best word you could have used too. Like it is. It absolutely feels that way. I mean, we're just. It's like it's almost like trying to look above ground and seeing the battle going on, and like, do I go right? Do I go left? Do I go down the middle? I mean, there's just so many things that need worked on or fixed or addressed or focused on. And it's just like, what's more important? What's, what's the most dangerous, right? What's the most, what needs the most help? What, it's, I can say that certainly in my career, it's never been, it's always been challenging. Let me put it that way. I think it's the best way to put it. It's no matter which industry I've been in, no matter which vertical I've led in, it's been a challenge every day of my life.
So how did you get started in cyber? What was kind of your career path, your journey into this dark world, as some would paint it? Or,
The dark world.
I hate the images of guys in hoodies being hackers.
Right.
Or the binary code. I think.
If you see someone in a hoodie, it's like they're probably a hacker. I mean, that's for real.
Here's. I'd like to watch a hacker wear like.
It's got to be like dark in front of their face and like you can't see.
It's gotta be cold wherever they are.
Even if it's in California.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
San
They got to have a
Diego.
hoodie. Yeah.
It's 85 degrees outside.
You must be a hacker because you've got a hoodie on in 85-degree weather.
It's got to be a black hoodie too, remember.
And I can't see your face, even though it's the middle of the day. That's so weird.
And remember, you can always solve a problem 10 seconds before something really bad happens by clicking randomly on a keyboard. Because that's what cyber's all about, really. It's about, writing random stuff on a keyboard and then hitting enter and then watching it as it goes and everyone's holding their breath. Because everyone knows that's so real.
It's exactly how it happens. Yeah. So how did I get started? There's a couple stories. There's two stories I want to share. One is how I got started in IT, only because I think it's a great, great story. And hopefully it doesn't fall flat because I really like this story. So I was 18 years old. I'm going off to college, right? And first semester, first week of college, I, go to college, get my classes. I go and get a job, right? I had to support myself. I am now an adult, right? Like I have to be a grown up and buy my own food and then cook it too. Like, which is like, who thought of that, right? Like, it's,
what are Hot Pockets for? Stick them in the microwave.
Oh, I ate a lot of like ramen noodles and like popcorn, right? Like microwaved popcorn. Oh, hot dogs too. But the point is, so 18 years old, I get the job, I get the, my classes for the semester, my schedule, and first week on the job, first week of school, the owner of the hotel, it was a Holiday Inn, and it was a good sized Holiday Inn. It had like 350 rooms, and the owner of this hotel came to me and we had this casual conversation about school and what I was majoring in. And I'm like, oh, it's computer science. And so he's like, oh, great. We don't have a computer person. So congrats. You're now the computer person, the computer manager, whatever they called it back then in 1926. The computer manager.
You're not that old. It's not 1996, maybe.
1996, maybe 1996. You're the computer manager.
We can look your LinkedIn profile. Michael will find out right now when you went to college.
I screwed that one up. Here, he put his hoodie on, guys. You can't see this. He just put a hoodie on.
You're screwed now.
By the end of this explanation,
Mike is just randomly typing on a computer. Johnathan,
randomly,
you went to college in...
I found your social security number and your bank account numbers. I have now siphoned your entire 401k. So like 5 days into my computer science major, I became the owner of the computer system for a 300-room Holiday Inn. So obviously learning on the job became a big part of my success early in my career. But more importantly, to cybersecurity, I would say it was probably 15 years ago, 215 years ago, I had spent probably at the time a good I don't know 6 to 8 to 10 years, whatever. These time frames elude me again, 1926 and all. But point is, I spent a good amount of my time just doing network and system administration. Right, started at the hotel, it graduated from there, and I was just doing network and system administration. And I was getting kind of bored. of just configuring firewalls all day and like looking at, the IPS logs and working on the Cisco routers. And, it just, to me, I wanted something more. I just didn't see myself doing that for the next 30 years. So with that, I have a close confidant of mine, someone I've known for 20 years now. He's like a technology prophet. He's like a career soothsayer, I would say. I go to this guy. I'm like, hey, like I'm kind of bored with all this. Like, what do you think? What should I do next? Like, should I just quit tech? Should I go become a doctor or a lawyer or like, I want something more. And he just like right in that moment, it was just like, tunnel vision, it got dark around the edges. It's like a halo came over him. And he's just like, the future is going to be about cybersecurity. He's like, I'm telling you, and this is before. The crazy thing is this is before all those breaches, like all those wide, like, newsworthy, all these banks and all these, credit card companies and everyone's getting breached. And it's kind of before then. And he's like, the future is going to be about cybersecurity because today no one cares about it. And it was just like this awe-inspiring moment when Bill Gates thought of Microsoft, or like when somebody has that like life-changing experience. And so I went like all in. Like I took his advice that day. I went to my boss that day and I was like, hey, I want to own security here and it was a Fortune 500 company. It was a subsidiary of a Fortune 500 company at the time. And I was like, I want to own security. And he's just like, what security? Like, I don't care. Like, do, whatever. And it was almost like that. Like we had no program. It didn't exist. Like no policies, we knew like, let's make sure we have a firewall in place and let's make sure we have antivirus, on our laptops. But that was just like at that level. So that was it. Got a master's degree, went and got all my certification tests, started going to, different like training and networking events, started networking with colleagues in the security industry, started expanding my knowledge. I was working on security in the office, out of the office, on my personal time. And here I am now. 15 years later, I've been the head of security at 4 different companies, and I've had pretty decent success, I think.
Well, I think in cyber, it's you're successful quietly, and you fail like loudly.
Yes,
and it's very interesting to see that because today security folks like yourself, when you get that message from someone that says, "Hey, there's someone interviewing for the role." And it can be a great role, but then the second you go in for that interview, you start to ask some of your questions, you go, no. Because you realize like there's so many failures that could happen in that company that you don't want to take it because no one wants to hit. No one wants the reputational hit.
That, I have experience with that. I have gone and interviewed at a place, I don't want to name drop, obviously, because it was a very sensitive situation. But I had gone to the organization. It was a decent sized company, several thousand employees, and I went through these interviews, and everything seemed to be going great. And I interviewed with like the CTO and the CIO, and I can't remember if I met the CEO. But there's all these business leaders, executives. Even met some people that worked kind of like in the security org. And at the end of the day, after like 4 or 5 interviews, I was just like, why are you looking for a CISO, right? Like by the way, I do want to mention that the one thing people get wrong in interviews, I don't mean to digress, but the one thing people get wrong in interviews is they fail to interview the company, right? Interviews are a two-way street, right? Mm-hmm. If you're not interviewing the company like they're interviewing you, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? You could you could luck out, you could, strike gold and get the perfect position. But chances are, right, they're going to interview 10 to 20 to 30 people for that role, and you should be interviewing 10 to 20 companies for the right role, right? So I'm interviewing the company now. Right now, it's my turn. So I'm going and I'm asking questions like, what does success look like in the first 3 to 6 months? What's your short-term and long-term plans? What's the business objectives, right? What's your goals? Why are you looking for a CISO? Is this a replacement? Is this a new position? Is this are you looking to expand? What are your, and basically it was, we've identified we're in the middle of a breach. And we don't have a CISO, and it hasn't been announced yet. And so I'm like, no, thank you. I am running. You're looking for a fall guy. Is that what you're looking for? You're looking for to bring someone in as the fall guy or as the, are you serious?
Target didn't have a CISO when they were breached.
Right.
They had a VP of IT.
I think it was a VP of,
or director of IT security.
Yeah.
I heard him speak at the Electronic Crime Task Force, not the one you and I went to not long ago. That one was, I almost fell asleep midway through the second talk there. I was literally, my head was going.
They can get dry a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. There were 2 out of 3 really, really good talks. There was one talk that could have been replaced with anything. Hell, they could have put cat videos on YouTube. It would have been more entertaining. I kid you not. Video. No offense, I'm not going to name drop because I don't want to hurt that person's feelings.
Right.
But some people should not talk at events. They just shouldn't. They shouldn't. And it was so difficult. I couldn't stay awake. I was having such a hard time.
I think it's a good learning experience and opportunity. I try to encourage my team to go to speaking events and to get in front of people. And what is that saying? You go to a funeral and the person speaking and the person in the coffin. More people would rather be in the coffin than speaking. The people are more afraid of public speaking than death, I think, is what the statistic is. Wow. And
it's very nerve-wracking.
It is. It is. So I try to encourage people and my team, and they're not all good at it. So. I sometimes I sympathize with those people in case maybe they're early.
But here's the thing, as you're being asked to give a presentation, you realize that you're going to have 100 to 150 people in a room.
That's different, yeah.
And you go, all right, how do I keep 150 people engaged? Now you realize you can't.
Captivated, yeah.
Right, you can't. But your goal is to get 70% of the people engaged with you because 30% are going to be on their phones. There's nothing that you can do to keep them engaged with you.
That's right.
You kind of have to have that mindset. I think a lot of times people go to these conferences and, I see pictures of people posting pictures and I'm like, and I'm looking at the crowd and I'm seeing how many people are on, their heads are down.
It's like 30%, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's more depending on the speaker.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you aren't paying attention. You're putting up that you were speaking. You're not paying attention that out of the 50 people, 40 have their heads buried in their phone because you're not interesting.
Yeah, it happens.
Don't do PowerPoints.
You got to slip in some cat videos, I think.
Well, I think the fact is, don't use word-heavy PowerPoint presentations. When I do a keynote, it's all images.
I agree.
And it's quick images. And I learned that from a bunch of amazing speakers I saw. We had Robert Herjavec at one of our first conferences, and all he had was images. Boom, 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 boom.
No, he's fantastic.
Right?
He's amazing.
He's great. The images kind of give him where he needs to talk.
Yeah.
It's not too structured. There's something really boring about having a PowerPoint and having the speaker read off the PowerPoint. I don't need you to do that.
That is entry-level mistake, right? That is, I think
But you've got big CISOs that do that. Look at RSA. I mean, RSA is filled with this stuff. Big security conferences,
like today,
are filled with people who come with PowerPoints.
CISOs, walls of text, and
not
they're just
walls.
They'll
come with like 5 bullets. They'll read you the 5 bullets. They'll
and then
expand
read it.
and expand into some of the bullets and be like, and then they get repetitive. And I'm like, guys, forget the bullets.
Yeah.
Engage. People today are extremely, extremely visual.
It's true.
The thing about it is be visual about it. Just go about it, have a really good talk. But the VP of Target, what I was trying to get to, I heard him speak at an Electronic Crime Task Force earlier this year, I think in February, when we had our first of the year meeting. Guy's name's Bryce something. I forgot. His name's like Bryce something. Really, really nice guy. And I met him. And, he talked about the breach and he told a story. His presentation was engaging. I typically can't sit for more than 20 minutes. Like, I literally start fidgeting at 20 minutes. It's like clockwork.
Is this whether you're engaged or not?
No. If I'm not engaged,
Gotcha.
If I'm bored out of my mind, you get 10 minutes. After that,
I was
my
going to say
head gets
20
buried.
minutes is long if you're not engaged.
My head gets
2
buried
minutes
after
with
10.
me. Yeah, okay.
My head gets buried after 10 minutes. I'm in my. I give you 10 minutes of respect.
Okay.
Some people need 10 minutes to warm up.
Yeah, it's
right?
true.
They just do. They got to feel out the crowd and so forth. And so we kind of. He had me for a whole hour. He told the story of the Target breach, but he also helped you understand who he is as a person. He loves fast cars, and he races this old, collector car, kind of like in rally races. So I was like, oh, wow, this guy's really cool. And as he's going through the story of the Target breach, he's talking about lessons learned, things they went through. All of a sudden, right then and there, you're so hooked into him because you're understanding that he's a person. And it's not all his fault. And he's painting this picture for you of their operation room, before the breach, during, and after. And he's talking about the consequences of the breach from a perspective of, well, we had to go through layoffs and 2,000 people lost their jobs at Target following the breach.
Yeah.
That's a number. You never saw that on any headline anywhere.
You didn't. No.
And I'm like, these are the kind of stories that I want to bring out in the podcast, right? Because this is the kind of stuff where I go, this is the unheard of stuff that people aren't really talking about, but this takes the real toll. I had Graham Payne on, who is the former CIO at Equifax, who was the one guy who got fired. He was the human error in the Equifax breach. Dick Smith put everything on this guy. I won't call him Richard. His nickname's Dick. Right? So he acted like a dick. And he pinned it on one guy. They fired him the day before he went to Congress.
That's tough.
Right?
Yeah.
But his book's actually right there. He wrote a book about it. And it's unbelievable to hear that story. And to understand the human toll of a breach on people. Because we often look at it and we talk about the records. We talk about what was the reason for it. And I'm like, none of that matters. None of that matters. You know why it doesn't matter? Because there's no way feasibly for anyone to ever prove they were a real victim of a breach, meaning someone stole my identity because of your breach. No way to prove it.
I mean, I think in today's day and age, everybody's identity has been practically stolen 7 times or more by now, right? I mean, it's your information, name, email, address, whatever else.
Social, bank account.
There's so many breaches, and there's what's the it's eluding me right now, but the website that is where all the public data.
Have I been pawned? Troy's website.
I have been pwned is or have I been pwned? Yeah, is the email addresses for individuals. But there's a data breach website, regulated website that is where all the public reported data breaches are reported to. So you can go and look it up and search through how many data breaches have occurred in, let's say, 2019, and that might say something like 2,800, right? But then they also make a note on there that 90% of data breaches go unreported. So, but everyone who has come public, there is a website. I don't know why I can't remember right now.
We'll look it up.
There is a website you guys can go and look at, and it will list every data breach that's been publicly reported. And it goes back probably since like 2012 or something.
So when you look as you've been a head of security for multiple companies. Now you're kind of in a supply chain third-party company, but you were also in enterprise. We know the CISO challenge is always funding, right? It's getting the right amount of money to be able to do all your, everything that's on your list, to be able to fund everything that's on your list. But outside of the money, what's a big challenge between, let's say, an enterprise company to a mid-sized company to a supply chain company? What are some of the challenges you go through? What are the key differences?
I think some of the big differences for me, and I have, like you mentioned, James, I've worked at 2 Fortune 500s. I've worked at 2 startups. I've worked at a number of companies in between. And the biggest difference I've seen is coming into a smaller organization. It really is the maturity of the program, number one. I'll touch more on that in a second. And then secondly is sort of like the business objectives, like the focus of the business. So think about the maturity of the program. First of all, I've come into a company where pretty early on in their existence, and I was the first security hire to come in to build out a program. And really at that point in this stage, let's say the company's been around for a few years, they've got 100,000 customers, and it's really like they have nothing. They have no security at all. So I have to first evaluate, do I put in a WAF or do I patch the servers first, right? Like it's at that level, right? And so and if you're working for like an enterprise company or a Fortune 500 company, for me that was a little more about process development across the entire organization as a whole, right? The several business units, education, and again, this is speaking strictly on security education, process development, continuous improvement, right? So you're thinking more on like the process level, maybe more like the framework level. And so it's a pretty dramatic difference, right? And I'm glad I've had the opportunity to do both, because it's given me the chance to build a program from the ground up, starting with let's patch the servers and put in a web application firewall, and we should probably get some way to detect advanced persistent threats in our production environment, all the way to, okay, now it's a little more about governance, and let's continue to develop these policies and ensure we're meeting these audit requirements. And so it's really the full gambit.
Do you feel like, compliance and security for CEOs, for boards, go hand in hand? But for security folks, we look at compliance and we go, this is just another headache that may or may not really improve my security, because a lot of it is just, do your audits? Do you have, it's not very, very specific. A lot of it is very, very general. I feel like for security practitioners, compliance sometimes hinders security rather than enhances it. Do you find that to be a difference between enterprise to startups, where startups are more concerned maybe with, today it's GDPR, right? And CCPA, but big enterprise, they're worried about so much other stuff and so many more other compliance that it really does hinder security almost.
Yeah, I think so. Compliance gets a bad rap, right? And
no way.
And I'm not going to argue whether it's justified or not. But what I will say is, I think some of these younger organizations, some of these smaller businesses that are looking at security strictly through the compliance lens, I think they're going about it all wrong. Like that, for me, is I'm not coming into an organization to build out an InfoSec program thinking strictly about, we have to do these 14 things because it's what, it's what GDPR and it's what PCI and it's what, our SOC attestation requires. Even if they're looking at that stuff, right?
So can I stop you there for a minute?
Yeah.
Small companies look at compliance because enterprise companies require them to be compliant in order to do business with them.
That's absolutely right.
I think if small companies weren't required to look at compliance points, then they would really address security. But fact is, small companies have limited resources and limited funds. So when you're telling them, you've got to be, NIST, you've got to be compliant with NIST. And NIST is a great framework, but NIST doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? From, where are you at on your security controls, your top 20 CISs? Forget the 20, give me 10.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what really matters. Do you have controls in place? Not compliance. But that liability, that's a liability issue.
It really is. I mean, we could talk all day on that. And you are 100% right about the fact that, especially with like InVision, right? Today, I come into InVision 4 years ago, and we're signing on all these enterprise companies. So InVision is, just for some of you that don't know, it's a kind of a design and collaboration prototyping SaaS tool, right? We're the biggest in our industry, the biggest in that space by 20x, or I think over our nearest competitor. We have over 5 million customers, and we have 65,000 enterprise companies, 65,000 companies that use our product. So now, to James' point, I can say that all of them are we have contractual obligations, we have MSAs, we've got, all these security addendums added into contracts stating you're going to maintain SOC attestation, you're going to be PCI compliant, you're going to be like all these things. And so it is quite frequently driven by the customer, and to some degree that's unavoidable. I mean, if you want to be in business and make money, you're going to agree to what the customer is asking you to agree to. And that's pretty consistent across the board with enterprise companies.
And I agree with you. And I think there's companies who ask you the right thing. Mm-hmm. And there's companies who just ask you, give me a SOC 2 report. They don't really care the controls around the SOC 2 report. They don't even read them. They don't even read them. They just want to have it on file. So if something happens, they go, well, here's the SOC 2 report.
We did our due diligence.
And I feel like that's a part of kind of the transition now I'm seeing with some enterprise companies, where as they're dealing with companies like InVision, they've created the BISO role, the Business Information Security Officer, the guy who's really building a team to go out and sit with people like you who are CISOs of their vendors, right, of their third-party supply chain companies, and going over some of their security stuff, doing some of the due diligence, doing some of the auditing, also being part of the sales process. So they're involved, as InVision, right? If you guys had a BISO, you wouldn't have to travel all around. You'd have your BISO go everywhere. You'd be able to focus on the larger picture, right? Because your BISO would be going everywhere and talking to your different enterprise clients, understanding, being part of the sales process. And I've spoken to a lot of people who are CISOs who I feel like have the toughest job of all. Because you really do. When you're the CISO of Exxon, you don't really give a shit, because you're passing everything down to your guys. As long as your enterprise is secured, you really don't care, because you don't, as Exxon, your end user is no one. It's like Equifax.
That's right.
No one gives a shit. You don't give a shit.
That's
you can sit on your high horse.
That's right.
And you can just sit there and be like, you do it. Because you don't have customers that you're accountable to, because technically the people who you're collecting data on aren't really your customers. They're not even your users. They're the users of your suppliers and providers and so distributors.
That's right.
It's unbelievable and very, very infuriating. That's why I like to talk to people in your position, because you not only have to secure InVision and everything InVision has, you've got to account to security to your clients, but you guys also have vendors who you've got to go downstream with and also look at them. So you're right
Several.
You're like the Big Mac.
Yeah.
You're like that middle bun in the Big Mac.
Yeah.
Right? You're literally, and for those who don't know what a Big Mac is, Google it. Seriously. At this point, if you don't know what a Big Mac is, you should really just give up on life. But you're that middle bun in a Big Mac. How do you deal with it? I mean, what's that like? How do you manage I know you have some sort of life.
Wow. So it does come in from all angles, right? So we've got responsibilities to our customers, right? Our service has 2 different tiers of service. One is a sort of like a self-serve part of the product, which is just a single individual user, right, is going to sign up for InVision and use InVision, and they're going to be able to use InVision. They can use it for free. They can pay $25 a month for, multiple prototypes and all these different types of plans. Then we have companies, enterprise companies, one big statistic we like to tout is that InVision, all 100 of the Fortune 100 companies use InVision. So you can imagine the companies using our product. We have 60% of the Global 2000 use our product. We have every vertical known to man, federal government and defense, and then, obviously, financial institutions and utilities and auto manufacturers, and everybody can use InVision. It's just a design tool, right? So everyone is designing something, right? They're designing the next Nike shoe. They're designing the next website. They're designing the next prototype for whatever their product is. So we've got these enterprise companies, which we have, as I mentioned, like 65 to 70,000 of. So we're responsible to them and, trying to meet their security requirements and trying to meet their contractual obligations. And then on the flip side, we're a SaaS product. So SaaS can tend to grow out of control, right? We have, at one point in time, we were using, and this wasn't all about production data or customer data. Like I don't want to misinform anyone or mislead anyone. But at one time we were using like 200 to 300 SaaS products, like third-party service providers, right? And it's just different things. It's like, oh, I like what this tool does. I'm going to go and use a corporate credit card and buy it. And that happens when you're a young company, right? And you don't really have a good grasp on finance, and you don't have a CFO, and you don't have, because you're a small company and everyone has corporate credit cards and you're just like doing whatever you want, right? So we had a lot of that going on. We've now narrowed that down quite a bit. So now we have a sub-processors page that we promote to our customers, to the public, that has about 10 to 12 sub-processors that interact with customer data in some form or fashion. Typically like personal data, like email addresses and like that business analytics and stuff.
Kind of like your own app store.
That's right. So we've got that going on. And then how do we manage vendors, right? I think that's a good question. So I think there's a couple things that is critical when it comes to managing vendors. So we have our customers using our product. Our product and InVision is now using third parties, right? To for some of the performance, we have
to enhance it. People build on your product,
right? We're hosted in a large data center, right? We're using a cloud database service. Like all these things are going on. So the first thing I think that is critically important is to take care of the legal side of the house. So first of all, require contractually that their security, that they will maintain the same security standards that we have for our customers and our customer data, right? So first of all, we have to follow down, right? Through the contract, from what our customers require of us, we have to flow that on to third parties, right? So they have to maintain the same security requirements that we do. Number one. Number two, what's important is to understand the type of data that they're using, right? So, on some companies, some third parties, you're going to have more stringent security requirements than others, depending if they're handling actual customer data, actual personal data, or maybe they're just some random tool you're using to do whatever, right? And then thirdly, I think the big thing that people miss, and I think this is important, is you have to find a way to validate their controls, because anybody can say anything. And a lot of these third-party service providers are brand new. They're just starting up. You're not always talking to the big Fortune 500 companies. Their programs aren't very mature. And unfortunately, and I can attest to this, that companies will often just say yes to anything to get your business, right? To get the money, right? And they don't actually have the controls in place. They're not actually protecting the data like they say they are. So you've got to find a way to validate that data. And maybe you can't do that if you have 200 or 300 vendors you're using. But you've got to figure out some way to attest to their controls or to validate their controls, and that can be maybe building in the right to scan or the right to perform penetration tests or building a right to audit in a contract. Have those controls in place.
You kind of you bring up a really interesting point, which is how do you validate those controls? And in today's cybersecurity kind of ecosystem, you've got so many different people who will just name drop. Oh, we used this vendor for this. And that's supposed to kind of give you some sort of reassurance. It's supposed to give you some sort of, oh, well, you're using them. And a lot of times, I think, as evident in some of the most recent breaches, just because you use one company doesn't mean you're secure.
That's right.
And I think we're seeing that a lot with cloud, especially this year. The cloud's been headline, I think.
It's a hot topic.
It is a hot topic because more and more companies are migrating to the cloud.
Yeah.
Or more and more smaller companies that are just getting started, they don't have, when they get investor money, they're not even looking at buying servers anymore. They don't even buy racks. They're just like, everything's cloud. They start off with the cloud. That's the new generation of companies, is they're starting off in AWS or Azure or the Google Cloud or, some of the other cloud providers that are out there. And then there's that misconception around security.
So I think to that point, I think people don't entirely understand the line of where security responsibilities sit with cloud providers. And this is a big deal, right? So Amazon's a good example, right? AWS. They specifically state security is your responsibility. We're just a hosting provider. Like we're going to we're going to control the security of the physical security of the facility. We're not going to let, people bust in and like steal a bunch of servers and walk away with your customer data. Like that's their responsibility. And that's clearly outlined in their contracts, on their website, you go to reInvent, whatever, right? It's very clear that they draw a definitive line in the sand. There's I know with some third-party service providers, it is very gray. I know this, and I think you all know this. But with AWS, it is a very definitive line that they've drawn on what's your responsibility and what's their responsibility. And it's so misconstrued that and this actually happens with InVision too, to be honest with you, because we're a platform too. We're a design tool, but we're just the tool. We don't create the data. We don't, you create the data, you upload the data, you download the data. That's everything the tool is designed to be used for is done by the customer. So same thing with AWS, right? They're a platform, but it's gotten so misconstrued that they've even given guides. They even have a conference on how to secure their services and how to properly configure, S3 buckets and how to, properly configure security groups and best practices. And they point to, NIST and all these other frameworks. So it's interesting, right? It's interesting how people I use AWS and therefore I'm totally secure.
So I love that misconception. I've seen a lot of breaches happen that way, especially because people will use the different versions of AWS. And everyone thinks of AWS as being one thing, but they don't understand the Elasticsearch, the S3 buckets, the S4 buckets, and all these different buckets and what they mean. So most of the time, even the people who are setting up your cloud infrastructure, they don't understand what buckets they're using. A lot of times they're buying based on price and easy access, right? Oh, I know how to use this. This requires far more skills. I don't want to hire someone to do this. We're just going to use Elasticsearch. We saw that with the Malindo Air breach that just happened in Singapore. I don't know if you've seen it. So Malindo Air is a subsidiary of Lion Air, large Air Asia.
It's an airline. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep, Air Asia. So Malindo Air is a subsidiary of Air Asia. Just a subsidiary of Lion Air. They're a large, think of Southwest of Southeast Asia. That's what they are. They're a low cost, huge, but they have unbelievable footprint. Well, someone in Singapore had set up their cloud infrastructure. They used a third-party company out of India to do that. Well, they used the AWS Elasticsearch, so they didn't have any sort of encryption on any of their data. Then the vendor that they used to set it up in India, 2 of the employees went rogue and went in and took all the data because they knew the data was sitting there. They knew the data was unencrypted. So this, to me, is a very, very interesting breach for us as CISOs to kind of look at and learn from, which is Forget the fact that we all use third-party vendors to help us with migration to the cloud. You don't have the amount of money, time, or talent available today to really do it internally with a cloud migration, because there's different parts of your infrastructure that you're going to migrate to the cloud. Some of it, you need to do it at night. Well, here people aren't working at night, really. You can't get your team to work for 6 months straight in the middle of the night. You just can't. That's just not practical. That's not good for work life. That's not good for attrition. That's not good for anything. So you're using a company somewhere in the world, in Europe, in Asia, that's going to be cheaper, that's going to be able to do it when only 10% of your web traffic is hitting your site between, let's say, 1 a.m. to 6 a.m., where your site has very, very little traffic because most people are asleep and you don't have clientele in that part of the world, so you're using these foreign firms. Well, it's a case study of, number one, how are you vetting your overseas vendors and what kind of controls are you setting in place with their internal employees beyond just a contract, beyond just making them tell you, oh, we only hire people with degrees and so forth. I've seen it. That's not always the case. And you're not there to really manage those people to even understand it. But the second part of it is now, Singapore and Malaysia law enforcement are now requesting India to arrest those two for computer crimes and then extradite them or try them in India for it. Now, that from a legal perspective to me is also very, very interesting, because if this does happen, if India ends up arresting these two rogue employees in India, throws them in jail, that sets kind of an international legal precedent of some sort of case where I can go to another country and ask for them to take the perpetrators. And you and I both know we started this podcast talking about being in the trenches, not seeing your enemies, because our enemies are unseen, because our enemies don't wear hoodies. These are experienced criminals. They look like us. They sound like us. They network with us. We don't know it. They go into an office building. They work a 9-to-5 job. And then on the weekends, they're having a picnic with their wives and kids in a park somewhere. Or wives are having, don't mean to be sexist here, not all hackers are men. As we saw in the case of Capital One, Paige Thompson was a female. So, not trying to come off, in that PC friendly version of it, but they have families, they have lives, they work in companies. And a lot of times these structures, I've seen this in cases, which is really, really interesting. Kind of want to get your take on it if you've seen this as well. So there's the Secret Service FBI pulled out a study to kind of, they constantly talk about it in the small InfraGard and ECTF kind of meetings where to go. These hackers, they have their businesses. These guys wake up in the morning, they have a routine, just like you and I have a routine. They go into an office, but then these companies, the way they're structured is they have a social engineering department. Now, these guys don't know they're in social engineering. They know they have to go and identify key personnel in different companies. And then they put together a dossier and they pass it off to another team that starts to look at how to weaponize it. And then the team that looks at how to weaponize it sends it over to the weaponization team, but they don't interact. There's always that middle person in there. They're running these departments. Could be sitting in an office in Bulgaria. Another team could be in the Ukraine, and the final team could be somewhere in China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, or anywhere else. It can be in Estonia, in Lithuania, or even here in the States. It's fascinating. But it also kind of goes back to what we started with, was we're in the trenches. We don't see our enemies. Our enemies could seem like our clients. How do you deal with that challenge? Because I think that is really the ultimate task of a CISO. Because, sorry to keep ranting, but it's that zero trust model that everyone keeps talking about. Well, you got to have zero trust. Well, zero trust can only take you so long. Eventually, employees, they want to be trusted. If they're not trusted, if they're constantly under a microscope, they leave because they get paranoid. Some people don't deal with that paranoia, that constantly being watched properly. How do you deal with it? Where's that balancing act? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I would say the first thing I would say is that the reason why I think it can be difficult sometimes to identify who your adversary is because they're not always going to be this sophisticated nation state group that operates in multiple countries and time zones. And, like that does happen. I think that's where some of the more larger scale breaches may come from that, have been designed to circumvent, multiple layers of security, multiple business units over, several years, right? I think there's this plan in place to attack, you name it, Google or Microsoft or something, and that's going to be, a long drawn out process. But I think it could also be, and this is my philosophy, I think it could just also be people that just make bad choices, right? I don't think it has to be a career criminal all the time, right? Breaches happen a lot, inside, sort of like the insider threat, right? I don't think this is someone that's going to go from company to company to company to company to steal data. I mean, I think they just maybe have an error in judgment. They see a way to capitalize on a very visible weakness within an organization, and they know how to, they discover how to profit from that or capitalize on that or have a bad moment. And I think that's why it can be challenging, right? Because inside all of us is free will, right? We're here to make choices every day. You or I, James, could have an error in judgment in maybe not breach our company, but we make good choices and bad choices all the time. And the severity of those choices scale depending on the decision you make. But and how do we address that? I'm just not so sure I can get behind the complete zero trust model. I need people I can rely on and people I can depend on. And I need to be able to trust people to perform their jobs and to do their duty and to do what they're here for, right? To do what I hire them for. And I just don't know if I've ever been in a position at a Fortune 500 company or a startup that has the bandwidth or the ability to monitor everything all the time. Right. I just don't think that's possible.
Well, there's a thing about monitoring, but there's also the settings and the configurations behind monitoring. That's what I mean.
Right? The monitoring and the configurations and the rule sets and you're going to use as many resources managing that type of a model than to actually performing the job of security or security data.
So there was a breach where it's not public, so I know this based on some knowledge I have, so I'm not going to go into too much detail beyond how the threat actors really accomplished this breach. So the threat actors were able to breach the company through understanding internal protocols. And they were able to take data out without really setting off any of the red flags because they were able to understand at what point in the settings does it really raise a red flag. That's when data is being exfilled. Well, if I keep it under
that threshold.
If I keep that throttle in, I can sit there for not 100 days, not 180 days. I can sit there for 3-4 years exfilling data until someone actually picks it up. Because if I'm doing it during business hours, if I'm doing it when the network is really busy, that spike that seems unusual the first week, after 2 weeks becomes extremely usual. After 3 weeks, it's normal.
Yeah, we see this.
And then
we see this every day.
AI makes the adjustment, or machine learning makes that adjustment. And that conversation ends up going down, and you don't even know it's happening. And I think that's part of the challenge with the zero trust model or trying to use AI or machine learning is they go, well, it'll detect it. And you're like, no. Machine learning is going to adjust to it. AI is depending on how well the AI is really operating. And there's a big difference. We were having a conversation, I think, I can't recall who it was with about AI and machine learning, I think last week. I think it was a conversation I was having. I moderated a panel somewhere, and I think that was the conversation.
I think we've had that conversation several different times.
The difference between AI and machine learning, and then how if I see I got an email yesterday from a vendor who I'll keep unnamed, and it said our device is AI ML. So I replied and I said, if they answer this, I will not only take this meeting, I may give them a shout out for free. And so I send them an email and I go, how can your product use AI and ML, and what's the difference? Crickets. Stop for the vendors that listen to this show. Understand the difference between AI and ML. Understanding that today people don't buy into that buzzword. It's not 2 years ago where you could say that and no one knew what the difference is, between, artificial intelligence and machine learning. Those are two very, very, very different things. That's like saying, hey, a Tesla and what's that Nissan electric car? Calling them the same thing. No, they're not the same thing. A Tesla is AI. That Nissan car is machine learning. The Nissan, is it the Versa? Is that what it is? Oh, the small egg-looking electric Nissan car.
The Versa is
like
using
this
ML?
$8,000 car. No, but I'm comparing them.
Okay.
So the Nissan Versa isn't really an advanced electric car. It's a very, very basic electric car.
Yeah.
They built
super
it
inexpensive.
Super inexpensive, but they've built it kind of, and that's what machine learning is. It's a super inexpensive way for a machine to learn how you operate and then adjust parameters as it sees. It's not designed to really snuff something out. It's more designed to adjust to reduce your false positives. Tesla is AI. Right? Because Tesla comes with its own artificial intelligence. If I turn a turn signal, have you test drove a Tesla?
I have not.
If no one's test drove a Tesla, you should go test drive a Tesla, because test driving that car will make you. I have a Benz. I love my Mercedes. I'd trade it in for a Tesla tomorrow if I could afford it. Any day of the week. Because if I turn on a turn signal on my Tesla in autopilot mode, it will switch lanes automatically, and it'll recognize if there's cars. So if I turn on my turn signal and there's a car next to me, it'll either slow down or speed up, but it'll maintain speed and switch lanes safely and continue to roll. That's AI.
Yeah. That's it.
Right? It's thinking on its own. It's replicating the movement and it's replicating the human mind.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. So when someone puts AI machine learning, I realize they're selling me bullshit.
You do. I don't know if everybody does, though.
Well, I hope that more people listen to the podcast.
They need to listen to this show.
Right. Because
you just laid it out.
Because that's so... It's really simple, but it's so important for people to understand that difference. When you're buying a security product, what's the difference between machine learning and what's the benefits for your organization? And does it fit your risk appetite and your operational and security controls? Because if your OPSEC isn't done right, then you're done. Your machine learning is only going to enhance the hacker's ability to really take advantage of your systems. But if you've got really smart AI, when anomalies start to happen or irregular traffic start to happen, AI would automatically adjust to it and alert your team and allow you to investigate. And then that becomes, is your team good enough to investigate and find that exfil?
I definitely think the power is in early detection, right? Really having the right talent, right? The right people on the team, the right, the quick response. It's the early detection, I think, is where the biggest bang for your buck is, right? If it's something, if it's this throttled exfiltration of data that just causes this small little spike at certain times during busy times of the day, you're just going to grow used to it, right? You're just going to think it's normal. It's just going to happen. And that's how things like this happen over 3 and 4 years. And that is, by the way, you said that and we blew over it pretty quickly, but that is not uncommon. Like, you could talk about the number of breaches that have been discovered that have been happening for multiple years.
Have you seen
months?
Have you seen the Netflix show The Spy?
I've seen it advertised. I haven't watched it yet, but I want to.
Sorry, my gallon of cold water.
It's a milk jug, in case you didn't see it.
It's like huge, and it keeps water cold for 24 hours.
Oh, nice.
And it keeps something hot for 12 hours. And when I can't drink like room temperature water, when I was in Eastern Europe, Like they serve you like it'll be 90 degrees outside and to bring you room temperature water.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can I get an ice? And they look at you all weird. You're like, it's 90 degrees outside, asshole. I came in here not to buy room temperature water. I want really cold water. Goddamn Europeans.
Yeah,
right?
no ice.
Especially Eastern
Yeah.
Europeans.
No.
Don't get me wrong. I don't care. I don't really care. They know this. They know this shit. When I was in Romania, men would walk around like literally with their shirt inside out showing their stomach when it's hot outside. Like that's the gypsy way of cooling down.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you,
That's weird.
I know it.
You don't want to see a man's belly button.
No, that is
Not when you're
weird.
walking down the street.
That was not
Eastern European.
being hit, a gypsy.
that was not what I expected as a topic of conversation on this show today. But you have to, with James, you have to prepare for anything.
Everything.
You need the cliff notes on life
That'll be the
if you're
title.
coming onto this show. So Eastern European bellies. Let's talk about that for a minute. No, but seriously though, you do bring up a good point. Like if you see an American show up in Europe anywhere, bring them ice. Like we use ice over here. Like I want cold water when it's hot outside.
Or a cold Coke. You ever had room temperature Coke?
That sounds horrible.
It is horrible.
I would rather see an Eastern European belly than drink a warm Coke.
It's really bad. It's really, really bad. I've been to those nations in my travels, and it's not like everywhere I go sit down I'm like I want cold water or cold soda water. And by the way, in parts of Europe when you ask for water they bring you carbonated water.
It's carbonated water.
Yeah, and they're like no I want flat water.
Still,
they go, oh you gotta say still, and I'm like it's water.
Yep.
Like no wonder this continent is full of crap. You guys don't even know what water is. But I wanted to get to the spy. I asked you about the spy because the spy is a very, very interesting. So how Eli Cohen, so Sacha Baron Cohen does an amazing job acting in this series. Who knew that the guy who plays Borat can actually act in a drama series and act very, very, very well. He plays the role to perfection. My hat's off to Sacha Baron Cohen. Kol hakavod. In Hebrew, that means good job. And he plays this role perfectly. And the way they caught him, and I don't want to give away the show, but it was actually the zero trust model. It's if you actually watch it, and I'm not going to take away more from it, the way he got caught was a zero trust model by one person.
Interesting.
Watch it. It's a 6-episode series. Each episode's around an hour. So it's something you can watch on a Friday night, put your kids to sleep. Once you start watching episode 1 and 2,
you can't stop.
You can't stop.
You got to binge.
I binged it.
Okay.
I binged it over 2 nights.
Okay.
And I was like, and it was a weekend, and I was just like, I got to watch it, right? Because I know the story. My parents are Israelis, so I know the Eli Cohen story. It's something that, when I went to middle school in Israel, we spoke about it. I mean, this guy was an Israeli spy who reached deputy defense minister in Syria. He was deputy defense minister. That's insane.
Pretty good spy.
It's a great spot. And he did it all in 5 years, but the show does a very good job of kind of showing you his transformation from a normal person who was an accountant at a department store in Israel to becoming a spy for the Mossad. And the toll that it took on him and his family. So to do a really good job of just kind of giving you the emotional aspect of it. But as someone who's been in security pretty much my whole life, I watched the show and I'm able to connect the dots. And I think when you watch it, Johnathan, you're sharp enough to be able to be like, oh, wow, I didn't think of that. But that definitely applies in the security because you start to see how he social engineered his way through the Syrian echelon.
It's my type of show.
It's unbelievable. He social engineered his way in, and he was able to get all the way to deputy defense minister before he was caught. And the way he was caught and the whole process behind it, zero trust model, the kind of the falling into a routine when you shouldn't be in a routine. Like I always tell security folks, tell me about your routine. And if they start telling me a routine, I go, oh, you're gonna, I already know your problem. You're in a routine. Security folks can't have a routine. Do you have a routine?
I definitely don't have a routine.
Good.
Yeah, I haven't had one for a really long time.
What technologies do you think we're missing in cyber?
I feel like this is the time. Micah, what do you think? Is this where I share like this profound knowledge about what the security industry is missing, and then James just disappears, and all of a sudden he's like the next Bill Gates, and he's a billionaire, and he has this new product, and I feel like this is the time he's asking.
Micah's like yes,
he's
yes.
asking for like my trade secret.
Well, I don't want your trade secret. I think listen, I know part of I know the challenges that exist in the industry, right? There's a ton of challenges. We're so intertwined. If you looked at the 3,000 security vendors out there, and we were to put them in boxes, 90% of them are detection and recovery, and only 10% are anywhere near prevention, identification, and so forth. And so, we live in an industry where most of our products are post an event rather than pre-event. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's a difficult question to answer though, because I almost feel like if I don't know if there's anything people haven't really thought of, and I feel like if you can think of it, there's like an app for that, right? It's almost, to me, I feel like there's areas where the market's not ready for it yet, right? And I think about sort of like the evolution of security over the last 10 or 15 years, or maybe the evolution of technology, right? Let's put it that way. So you go back several years ago, a decade or two ago, and everything people were making were things that you can use, things that a new firewall technology, a new antivirus. It's things that you can use. It's things that you can put into place, things you can implement, things you can touch, things you can feel. And now I think the commodity is more behavior, right? It's like behavioral analytics, right? So it's more about, why did I choose to buy that product? Why am I hungry at 3 a.m? And it's scary, right? So it's like today, it's like your fridge knows when you're hungry, right? Your car knows where you're driving to on every Tuesday at 3:00, right? It's like your computer knows when you're on the internet, or your phone, I should say, your phone knows, when you're using it and when you're using different apps. And this is information that people can commoditize, right? I mean, they can profit from this, right? I mean, you think about how they can manipulate you. It kind of came to light there was this Netflix, I think it was a Netflix series about this last presidential election, and how kind of like the whole scandal about how advertising was targeted through Facebook ads, and that kind of like how that whole thing transcended, right? And it's all kind of based on kind of like behavioral analytics, right? It determined, the people. It doesn't help a presidential campaign or a candidate's campaign to target the far left or the far right, right? The 20% on both sides that know who they're voting for. They've been voting, they voted that way their whole life. Their families voted that way. They're not changing. It doesn't matter what you say about this candidate or that candidate. They're going to vote that party, right? It's that middle 30 to 40%, the undecideds, right? And those are the people you have to target, right? And those are the people you have to persuade. And that's what's going to decide an election, right? And so being able to sort of analyze their behaviors and what sort of like impressed their minds, like, what persuaded them to choose one party or over another. I think that's the type of information that people are looking to buy and sell today. What do you think, James?
I feel like the challenges that everyone's spending money on protecting, which is data, and everyone's missing the big picture here, which is money. Mm-hmm. So last week, I think it was both Secret Service and FBI. We had a small business event here in Alpharetta. And they both said that business email compromise is costing the U.S. economy around $28 billion a year. We're not talking about $5 billion. That's my stomach. It's hungry.
It's a good microphone.
It's a good microphone, right? I picked it up. Yeah. My stomach's going,
Feed
me. Feed me. Because of my fast yesterday. Yesterday was a Jewish fast day. And so I ate last night. I had a little bit of soup because, when you come off a fast, you're not supposed to go and eat a steak. That's really bad for your body. So you're supposed to ease back into it, but I'm not easing back into the fast. I'm kind of like slowing down, getting ready for Yom Kippur next week. So my stomach is no, but it's good to explain to the guests, to the listeners, so they know why is Micah not feeding James? Make me a sandwich, Micah.
I'm guessing that's not getting cut out.
Yeah, we don't like to edit on the show. Only cuss words. But it's one of the, because we want to give the listeners an authentic experience. But where was I before my stomach went crazy?
You were talking about the FBI statistic.
Right. So business email compromise. I think I'm not seeing any cybersecurity vendors coming out there and starting to address and integrate cybersecurity into business processes. And I think that's a critical piece that we're missing in cybersecurity today, is the integration of security into business process across the entire organization to not only reduce the risk of financial fraud and employee fraud and vendor fraud and payroll fraud. That is being written off by companies because those aren't breaches. That's fraud, and fraud doesn't get reported. It gets written off at the end of the year. You file an insurance claim. There's a settlement. You get some of your money back and you move on. But I feel like that's a part of it. That's also where the CISOs and some organizations aren't even empowered to go in there and start addressing it. And I feel like that's the challenge. I feel like that's where the industry's absolutely oblivious. I haven't been able to find it. I've been looking. I'm almost to the point where I'm about to go reach out to a bunch of investors and be like, I have an idea.
It's a good idea, right? I don't... It's difficult to tackle, right? Because you think about the CISO today, that every domain they have to cover, right? I mean, they have to cover
technical domains.
Yeah, the technical domain and the governance and risk and compliance and customer requirements and frameworks and and they've got to have teams and they've got to have money and they've got to be able to support all these processes and all this documentation and all these technical controls and someone to watch the log and someone to respond to these events and then you think about process development and how do we go back and identify financial fraud in our payroll department, right? I would agree. I just don't know if people are thinking about that. I don't know.
They're not, because they don't understand who's doing it and they don't really care. See, when that happens, they typically will call you and be like, hey, we need your forensic team to check something. Your forensic team goes out and checks it. You check it off. You don't really care because someone asked you for your forensics team. Yeah. You're just going to deploy them. You don't really want to know what it is because your plate's so full. And the CFO and the COO, they don't want you to know either, right? Because they don't want... they're going to set up post controls after the event, but those controls will hold into place for about 6-9 months. Hackers will figure it out again, and then it repeats itself. It's rinse, wash, repeat. And it's really, really easy. So I've been doing this research, and I'll give you kind of a hint. I'm going to publish it later this month. I'm going to do a whole podcast on it. And really put it out there, but it's how hackers are manipulating employees through all these various different tactics to give out business processes so that they know how to come in and get money. Because at the end of the day, your data is worthless. Your data is really worthless unless you're a Marriott or an Equifax or OPM or Chase or Capital One. That data is valuable because there's something to be done with that data. If you're able to siphon it off undetected and start to use it. Otherwise, it means nothing, right? If you're detected, if you do a brute force breach, which is detected and you steal data, that data is going to automatically go under every single microscope, and everyone's going to be looking at it, waiting to see how you use it, and then that's how you're going to get caught. But if you're siphoning off data slowly, you're fine. You'll be able to monetize it for years and years and years and years. Someone said this, I can't remember who, I want to attribute it to it, but I want to attribute it to that person because it was really, really smart. But he said, Frank Abagnale Jr., the guy from the FBI agent.
Yeah,
from Catch Me If You Can.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him at a conference and he goes, we are witnessing the greatest transfer of wealth in human history through cybercrime.
That's fascinating. You know, you mentioned, you kind of alluded to like social engineering a little bit. And I feel like, and I think research has shown that that's sort of like the method of choice. That's the preferred attack vector now, right, for criminals. I think that the Verizon data breach report showed that it's not, companies are much less likely to get breached or infiltrated from a group of nation state actors sitting in North Korea trying to hack your systems, right?
North Korea's after money. Right. They don't have any.
I mean, it's that report, I don't remember the statistics, but that report showed that most breaches
were financial.
Yeah.
I think it was like 78% was financial.
And done through social engineering.
Correct.
Right?
And social engineering is manipulating your business processes.
It's almost, it's like what you said, like you could put a control in place and maybe it'll hold water for 6 to 9 months and then rinse and repeat, right? I think people that are...
because controls aren't integrated in technology.
Right.
So the FBI's idea of their solution for an invoice or a bank account change is pick up the phone and call. But how realistic is it in a company, let's say like InVision, where you have 300 vendors that bill you every single month? How realistic is it?
It's not. Yeah, that's not.
If you've got 30 bank account changes per month or per year, how realistic is it to make 30 phone calls? It's not. It's not realistic because your accounts payable is one person. Mm-hmm. They got to do 300 payments on the 10th, 15th, and 20th of every month, right? Or whenever they pay, right? They've got to go sit down. They're so concerned with lining up the cash flow with the CFO and making those payments. They don't have time to pick up the phone and call someone because of a bank account change.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a two-way street, right? I think that not only are we falling short on properly educating and training our employees on the dangers of social engineering, phishing scams, that type of thing, but also the controls are definitely missing, right? If they falter and send out that email with that bank account information or do the bank wire because they suspect, because they believe the email is from their CEO, there's no controls in place to catch that, right? If it exceeds human intelligence, then...
Well, it's deriving off of your loyalty, mm-hmm. right? Like you said, I want employees that I can trust, that are loyal, that can get the job done. So it's derived off of taking advantage of that loyalty that you just said that you look for in employees. Hackers know that.
Yeah.
Right?
And honestly, the employees, most of them, I think implicitly, they just want to do their job. That's exactly what I was going to say. They just want to do their job. They want to do a good job. They want to, they want to
make you happy
and see their kids.
Right.
And you know what I'm saying?
Go to soccer practice.
Put food on the table.
Or in Micah's case, karate.
Yeah.
Taekwondo.
There we go.
Sorry. I remember when he was like 2 years old, though, he was in karate, right? He's like, ah. He has a really
he's
cute.
Connecting with his Korean roots.
Is he?
Yeah, the whole place is just decked out. Korean owners, Korean trainers, big flag.
Oh, wow.
Nice. Half Korean stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Micah has the most interesting wife on the planet.
Ooh,
His wife's Korean.
Okay.
But she was born and raised in Georgia, so she has a southern accent.
Oh, that is awesome.
It is the first time I met her, I was expecting like the Asian accent.
Yeah.
No. She sounds like Reese Witherspoon.
Southern Belle. Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. That's great. So I guess you're big into like Korean food, Korean barbecue, bibimbap.
That's all we eat, man.
Bibimbap.
Bibimbap.
Seriously, it's like my favorite word, like on the planet.
Yeah.
Bibimbap.
And you know what it is? All it is it's traditionally just leftovers. It's leftovers with an egg on top and some hot sauce.
Wish you didn't tell me that. I will never eat bibimbap again.
No. I think it makes it even better.
Leftovers are good.
No. I mean, traditionally it was created as a leftover dish.
Oh,
now it's all made on the spot.
Gotcha.
That's
Okay.
I'm a big Mongolian grill kind of guy. We always digress on this show, but I think that's what makes this show really the number one cybersecurity show is you don't get bored to death with, a pitch on something.
I just saw on LinkedIn right now there's a new vendor podcast that just came out. They just reached out to me asking if you could be a guest on their show.
I can be a guest on their show?
Yeah.
A vendor podcast. I would be delighted to go on a vendor podcast. Thank you, Micah. I'll go with Johnathan. We'll go as a tag team.
Wait.
Like on Step Brothers at the job interview.
So, hello, Miss Lady. I'm here to help with the Pan thing. Are you saying Pamd? P-A-M-D? Pam. I want to do that. Like, I want to do that for a job interview. I've always wanted to do that for a job interview. Yeah. When that movie came out, I worked at Verizon Wireless. And we were... at the time, I was working at a Circuit City kiosk. Remember Circuit Cities?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So I was the assistant manager and the manager, and we all loved Step Brothers, and it was 4 of us, and we're all dudes. So you know that like we had like no limit to stuff we would do there. And given the fact that none of us work at Verizon anymore, we used to do the weirdest stuff. Shenanigans all day long. So we would like give on a Saturday when we're really busy, would give each other words to drop from Super Troopers, like meow. So it'd be like, take a look at this phone now, meow. And this meow here, and you just try to throw it in there with customers.
You get points.
Or beans or infidels. Yeah. Tacos, burritos.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it was the funnest job. It was the funnest 7 months of my life.
Short because was it the shenanigans?
It was it was our because we had so much shenanigans. We were really, really fun, and people bought from us anything we sold.
Oh, nice!
Because people were having fun. They were laughing as they were buying.
You're creating an experience.
We did, and so all of us got promoted, and we ended up getting separated, and so. Yeah, it was really...
It was not as much fun.
No, because then a lot of us had to go to work in corporate office. And
you're trying your shenanigans there.
And there's no shenanigans.
There's no shenanigans
at all. 0 shenanigans allowed.
Let me show you the quarterly profits, meow.
Meow.
Oh, sorry, I'm speaking to the board. Apologize.
This BlackBerry keeps the infidels out of your network.
I'm sorry, sir. That was inappropriate. And then you have to correct yourself.
You ever wear white shirts, and then under the white shirt you wear a really like what Micah's wearing. He's got the CyberHub Engage white T-shirt. You'd wear it under a white collared shirt. Yeah, we used to do that. Only our shirts under would be like, I'd rather have Bud Light than die, or we'd wear PBR shirts and stuff like that. Yeah, nice. We were completely Colorado rancher kind of like PBR was our beer.
I thought it was Keystone was your beer.
Coors Light is the beer.
Keystone, I think, is the one you go for when you have $0.
I think Keystone is how you start to drink beer in high school.
Natty Ice too.
Right?
That's what the Nebraska.
Keystone
that's
the
poor man's beer.
That's the poor man beer, right? Because you get like a 30-pack of beer for like $10.
I was gonna say for like $6.99.
Right.
Those were the days, early 20s.
And then you get like a big handle of vodka, like the cheapest vodka possible, and that was like high school. College, you go to Coors Light. That's a more sophisticated. Coors Light, Bud Light, and PBR.
Yeah.
Right? And then now I drink Heineken. I'm sophisticated.
Can't go wrong with Heineken.
Can't go wrong with Heineken or Modelo.
Although the new Bud Light commercials are pretty amazing.
Bud Light commercials. I don't watch TV, so I don't catch those commercials.
You gotta look them up on YouTube. They're amazing.
So are they? I missed the what's up Bud Light commercial.
That's not in still?
That was it is. Micah, no, it's in. No,
what's up?
No, it's totally in. Like
okay. Good.
Keep
I will
using
continue
it.
to use it. Then.
Yeah, you have to continue using it.
We'll bring it back. We're bringing what's up back.
You heard it here first. The James Azar Show.
Well, we are almost out of time, but I do want to ask you one more very, very serious question. What are some of your best practices as a CISO that help you maintain success and stability in your position?
Best practices. So there are several. This conversation could go on for at least another 45 minutes, but let me try to narrow it down. So the first thing I would say that I think is the most important is CISOs need to stop, and maybe I'm speaking for all CISOs, or maybe I'm making a lot of enemies right now, but CISOs need to stop viewing their role through a narrow lens, right? I think as a CISO, first and foremost, and as a CFO, and as a CTO, and as a CIO, and as anyone else, and as a security analyst, and an engineer, and a marketing whatever, and a support person, I think our primary objective is to ensure the success of the business. I've been preaching this for probably a decade now. When I interview people, that's actually one of the questions I ask is, what is your primary objective in this role? Like, so basically, first and foremost, I want people that want to see the business succeed. So out of that comes the fact that I want to be a business enabler, right? I want to be a catalyst to business success. So I'm just not here just to shut people down and turn people away and like, you can't do this and you can't use them and you can't whatever, right? I think it's a bad way to approach business. And I think it's a bad way to approach information security, right? What I try to do is try to present the risks, the pros, the cons. I try to tell you, what risks are inherent, and let the business make their own decision, right? If it's not saying you can't shut people down if it's that much of a risk, right? Like, you do have wild cards you can play, but first and foremost, I'm here to ensure the success of the business, and I think people should adopt that sort of theology more often. The second thing I think is what's made me successful is probably talent acquisition. And I think it's really hard to find good talent. I don't think anybody would argue that point, but definitely talent acquisition is a challenge. For me, it's not about just filling a seat, right? I know the bigger the company gets, the more roles that are open, the harder it is to fill all those with like star performers. I get that. But at the same time, getting the wrong person in, right? Getting someone that isn't going to perform well, or isn't going to execute well, or doesn't have the experience you're looking for, or doesn't fill the requirements that you need for that role. Getting that person in house can honestly be devastating. It can cost you a lot more to replace that person than to simply wait an extra month to fill that role. Right?
Bad hires are very
hires.
costly.
So for me, I'm willing to wait to fill roles for the right person than to fill it with the wrong person. And I think the third thing is that I want to share with everyone is understand your customer, right? Understand what a customer wants, what a customer needs. Now, this is maybe a little more applicable to the SaaS industry than it is maybe the fintech field. But what I can tell you is that I have a pretty I have a pretty influential role in the development of the security of our product. And if a customer doesn't want seven steps of multi-factor authentication before they log into their account, I'm not going to require the business or the product owners to implement 7-factor authentication, right? So we have, what I've done with our product is we've implemented a bunch of options, right? So there's a configurable dashboard where administrators can turn on session timeouts and multi-factor authentication and password complexity and all these things, right? So again, we're a platform, right? We're a platform that customers use us to design, create prototypes, create design assets. And so for us, it's about allowing the customer to control their security to their level of comfort. And I think that's what's important.
I think those are some of the most authentic tips that I've heard on the show. because it's you talk about a CISO enhancing the business rather than limiting the business, and I feel like that next generation of CISOs, someone who I know very dearly was telling me, I sit on the board for the National Technology Security Coalition, the NTSC, and they had the last roundtable last month, which was unfortunately a few days before our event here in Atlanta, so I couldn't attend in Seattle. And I had invited a very young CISO to the group, and Brett Ehrenslot was there, the Ehrenslot from the CISO for Microsoft, and a few others, very, very big heavy hitters. Billy Spears, I think a lot of CISOs know who Billy is and Brett are. Great guys. But he was challenging some of their status quo. Now, these guys have been doing it for 20, 30 years. They're very intertwined. This is a kind of a young and up-and-comer, 15 years, kind of very similar to how long you're in the business. We come with a different form of thinking than they do. So as they're saying, you can't do this, he was challenging him saying, why not?
I love asking that.
And I feel like that's that next generation of CISOs that we're coming and saying, we're challenging that status quo. Not that the old guard is bad. The old guard, they're great. They're pioneers. They started a position that didn't exist. They are valuable. I wish most of them would, I kind of want to grab 5 of them for just a podcast that I can turn into a book, a CISO guidebook, right? Of just stuff that we can learn from these guys. The fundamentals, practices, right? Not the stuff that you take in certs. Right. I think the fundamentals of being a CISO, from reporting to the board, to taking on the role, to interviewing for the role, to picking your team, the stuff that no one really teaches you, the stuff that you really learn on the job, but that can set you back months or years sometimes in your role. It's that kind of stuff. It's the whole purpose of this podcast is for that.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like what you just said is the kind of stuff that people really need to kind of hone in on, which is make friends with your product folks. At the CyberHub Summit, I did a roundtable with a few CISOs, and I said the role of us as CISOs shouldn't be security practitioners. We should be running our department internally like we're campaigning for president. We should be constantly campaigning for security. We should find the people in our organizations that are willing to go knock on doors.
That's right.
Right? And those people should be our ambassadors within different departments. Where's my sales guy that's a complete geek on security and technology that I can take and I can put him under our wing and involve him a little bit in what we do to kind of give him diversity? One, I attain him a little bit longer in the company, and I'm cross-training, which is effective for any organization. But number 2, now he's kind of delivering that message to his team, and he's our silent ambassador. And doing the same. And I feel like those are the kind of stuff that we really need to be focusing on as CISOs that we should be doing more of. And thank you so much for sharing that. That was really, really authentic. I wish more people would listen to it and really reach out to Johnathan on LinkedIn and pick his brain, because that's the whole point of this. You can also join us for our CISO chats on Twitter, right, Micah? Those are Thursdays? CyberHub under the hashtag CyberHub chat every Thursday from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. That's right. We go live on Twitter with a bunch of questions and a really very cool kind of conversation. So you can join us on Twitter, and maybe Johnathan will tune in every once in a while. And
don't miss it. Yeah,
don't
incredibly valuable.
It's the kind of stuff where you're not going to get it in a book. You're not going to get it in the certs. And all of those stuff are very, very important. They're really good it's very good to read. It's really good to get your certs. But then it's also good to get the practicality of it. And that enhances your time to market, because you avoid some of the mistakes that others did. And if you make them, and you make the mistakes even after you heard it, you're going to know how to recover because you've heard the stories. And so you're not going to be at a loss in recovery. You're going to be very quick to be able to be like, oh, I made this mistake. I know I shouldn't have done it. I did it, but this is how you get out of it. And you kind of be able to get out of that hole. Johnathan, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time. Second time.
A pleasure.
But no technical difficulties this time, Micah, right?
We're all 100%.
We're 100% good. I'm grateful for it. Thank you, Micah. Thank you, Johnathan.
Thank you.
Folks, thank you so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe, give us 5 stars, comment below on our podcast. That's how we get to more people. It's your support as our listeners that helps us get this content out there for more people. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back with more CyberHub Engage Saturday CISO Talk special next week.